Thank you. Our next speaker is Dave Gillespie, who's the Director of Energy and Sustainability Programs for New Jersey Transit, and in that role, he's basically involved in all aspects of those programs. He's also developed an energy and sustainability plan and a carbon footprint study for New Jersey Transit. And here he is. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'll try to keep my comments short. I come to you today as a little bit different from the rest of the speakers in that the perspective I'm bringing is a perspective of an operating business and how changes in climate and extreme climate impacts impact a business. And that's the reason that we are primarily concerned in doing these studies. By way of introduction, we're the sole or the primary transportation provider in the state of New Jersey with over 900 million passenger trips a day. We provide rail, light rail, bus, paratransit service throughout the state and interconnect the states of Pennsylvania and New York. We awarded a contract, a competitively bid contract, to do a study, to do this resilience of New Jersey transit assets climate study to First Environment of Boonton, New Jersey, a local consulting firm who used a sub of Dewberry Engineering. And we only gave them a couple of months and very little money to do this study. The scope of the study was to look at all of our assets, our business operating units, and how they would be impacted by extreme changes in climate. They were looking to get the report done by the end of February so that I would have it in time to release it today to give you more details at this presentation. However, because of Irene, we took advantage of having a lot better data to put into the report in a real-world situation of extreme climate impacts on our business. And so we gave them a 30-day or one-month extension, and the report will be in by the end of this month, which is in the next couple of days. The draft report is in, and I have that in my custody, and it determines the reason for the report is to determine the potential risks of weather-related events on our infrastructure assets, to conduct a survey of the current reports and research on the topics. This was the most daunting task for me as the Director of Energy and Sustainability for a business, is all of the literature that I kept getting on the subject and then trying to become a subject matter expert myself and failing at it. My pile of studies and all good supporting literature was this high. And so I bundled that all together and gave that as the first task of the consultant to summarize that. So you can see that that I've definitely got my money's worth out of it. So I have all that information synthesized, and our need for that information is for business reasons. We want to do a risk assessment and a cost analysis. So we want to know from a business perspective, is it smarter now to invest money and to prevent something from happening in the future, or is it the smartest decision to wait and mitigate it? And so we needed this information in order to drive those programs. The study did point out that there are no 5 to 20 short-term weather projections that are substantive, and so that's a weakness in the literature that was available to us. And so we're taking that in mind, but it did show us some good news in that a lot of the infrastructure that we thought may have been at risk may not be at risk over 20 years. So these reports don't always have to be bad news. They can sometimes be good news for your operating units. But it did show that we were going to have some 50-year impacts. And so we want to get this information into our planning and risk management functions so that we can look at ameliorating these things going forward in the future. The report actually gets down to detail and identifies the cost to implement the ideas for making our system more resilient to climate impacts so that we can use those in making our planning and decisions forward. This is the same picture that Jeff had on the cover of his report. This is a Trenton Transit train center during Hurricane Irene. And while New Jersey Transit lost revenues from loss of service, we didn't suffer any severe financial results from this flooding, but one of our sister railroads, SEPTA, did lose some rail equipment that was in the station at the time. While I'm mentioning that, I'll say that the reason that we didn't include we only included infrastructure assets in our study was that the mitigation plan that we have for movable assets, our rolling stock, is that we move it out of harm's way when something's coming, and generally we've had enough time to do that. So we didn't spend a lot of money on that. These are some other examples of weather-related incidents that we suffered with Hurricane Irene. The total cost to mitigate that storm for us was somewhere in the $2 to $3 million range, and that doesn't include the cost to New Jersey Transit from the lost revenue of not being able to operate on those days when we were closed down. So it can be a pretty significant business bottom line impact from climate change. This is just a picture to show you that we do live in the Garden State, and there has to be a fine blending of keeping the aesthetics and keeping our railroad catenary free of trees. We can't trim them back as far as we would like for operations and maintain our beauty. The climate impacts from the literature review are probably not surprising to anyone. This is the same list that most of you have seen in all of the studies. But having the list quite succinctly summarized is good for us in passing that information on to other staffers. So the conclusions and the recommendations are that there probably isn't anything significant that most of us in the room here don't already know, and most of the people that we work with are somewhat aware of. But what is new for us are some of these ideas on how we could make our infrastructure more resilient to these climate impacts rather than wait for the time when they occur and then we mitigate them. Having ownership of both the bus and rail, we have quite a significant mitigation tactic in that usually if something in rail goes out, we can bus them. Something in bus goes out, we can rail them. So we have a lot of built-in redundancy. We have a very strong infrastructure, electric power infrastructure, wherein we can run all of our railroad essentially on supply from JCP&L. If PSE&G goes out, and if PSE&G goes out, we can run it from JCP&L. So we have a lot of redundancy in our system and built in that allows us to continue to operation. What we need to do is we need to prioritize these potential actions that we can take and then get them into the planning stage so that we can look for funding for it. We can seek funding. I have already. The business case for sharing this information with the world is currently one of difficulty. It's not fraught with difficulty, but as a result of 9/11, a business has to look and say, how much of my weakness do I want to expose to the public? Do I want to release a report that in turn will be a guide for sabotage or for harming my system? So with that in mind, there will be some long discussions within the company before we release the report. And I'm sure that we will release something of value that can be shared with other transit agencies, but maybe redacted of some of the specific New Jersey transit infrastructure. For example, this report actually has GIS dots and data for everything that we own of a substantial nature in the state. And it says where its highest risks are. And so that's just another wrinkle that has to be considered when you're doing your environmental planning. And the last slide is simply my information. I would be glad to stay in touch with anybody and share any information and experiences that we've had. We are a public transit agency, and this study was funded by the New Jersey Department of Transportation. With that, I'll conclude my remarks.